Okay, could I have your attention, please? Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you to our first stage in evidence-based practices, evidence-based decision-making, the training. And hopefully that'll take us someplace where we need to be able to make this an effective effort here in Dunn County. I'm not going to talk. This is not my place today, but I'll turn it over to Judge Peterson. So Judge Peterson, take it away.
All right, thank you, Judge Smeltzer, and thank all of you for being here today. My name is James Peterson. I'm the Dunn County Circuit Court Judge, Branch 1. Many of you probably have known me for a long time, so you don't need that introduction. Give you a little bit of background here. I serve as the chairman of the evidence-based decision-making work group in our Criminal Justice Collaborating Council. We've been at this for a number of years, and so we were tasked with trying to get something accomplished this last year. And one of the first things that we did was to come up with a template to follow, and that's the National Institute of Corrections framework. And so this process, the first thing they had was to create a justice systems map. And we worked on that. I think we had a large meeting here in the first week of June of 2015. And we worked on that for quite a while. We finally have a finished product. You can see it up on the wall in room 1404. It's also online now. And many asked, what's the purpose of doing this? Well, the purpose was so that we had a blueprint to see where we are. And so as we make changes, then we can show those changes and sort of like a building or remodeling a house. So why are you here today? Well, after we completed the mapping, we sat down as a group and we worked on priorities. What do we need to do? There are many things that we want to try and get started, many exciting projects, at least exciting to me, but we reached a consensus in our group. And our evidence-based decision-making group, at least at the time, was with Sarah Benedict, Chief Atkinson, District Attorney Andrea Nodolf, Sharice Nielsen from Probation and Parole, and if I forgot anybody, that's just because I'm nervous here in front of a camera. I also want you to know that we're making a training video here. So we came up with this consensus. Before we do anything else, we need to do some training, sort of different types of training. But first, this is the training that's designed to try and give an overview to everybody who may work in the criminal justice system, regardless of what you do. And so here we are. We first, Sarah started looking into the cost of doing training. If we had somebody come here in one day, it'd be about $15,000, plus then you would have we couldn't record it, couldn't reuse it for people that couldn't get that training. And you've heard that Hillary Clinton talking about some problems with the criminal justice system, and her cost was about $600,000. So we decided that we'd do it ourselves. And part of what we wanted to do was to be able to get a group of people that are dedicated to do this training on an ongoing basis, and do this in a way where we're recording today so that people that miss it have a chance to see the training and hear what we're talking about. Now, this training kind of reminds me of a story someone told me a long time ago, and that was about a visit to a quarry. He came upon some people working there, came up to this first person, and he asked him, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm working for a paycheck. I got bills to pay, mouths to feed. I'm a hard worker. I'm here doing my job." Walks up to the second guy. He says, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm a stone cutter. I'm a craftsman. I've worked hard to get to where I'm at. I'm the best stone cutter in the county, and I am meticulous, and I'm the best at what I do." He goes up to the third person, and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." All right? So that's, you have on our flyer, sort of the theme here. Even if, whatever you're doing, wherever you are in the criminal justice system, we want you to have an idea that you're part of the whole. And so, what we're going to do today is we have a number of people that have agreed to be on our training team. Sarah Benedict, our criminal justice coordinator, Janae Brantner, our treatment team coordinator, and then Commander Schwartz is here on behalf of Chief Atkinson from the Menominee Police Department. Chief Atkinson, again, has agreed to continue on with us for our periodic training. And Sharice Nielsen here from, again, Probation and Parole is going to do a segment on evidence-based response to violations. And our District Attorney, Andrea Nodolf, is going to do a segment on the new pretrial diversion program. All right, so I want to get started here with my part of the presentation. And what I am going to do is a little overview for you. And I generally like to walk around, but we have one microphone that's going to go into the our recording, and the other microphone is a public address. We want you folks, if you have questions, we have some 3x5 cards on the table, so write down any questions you have, and then we'll collect them at the end, and we'll ask those questions. That way you don't have to be on the spot. You don't have to be part of the production unless you want to be. All right, so there's a few other things I'm going to try and slip in here from time to time if I remember. First of all, when I got thinking about this, there's many different examples people use to talk about evidence-based decision-making. For me, a kid born in 1960, I grew up during the Vietnam War, and the thing that I heard, and I remember still, is that you heard body counts every day. We heard body counts from Vietnam, and we heard body counts from the highways. And highway traffic safety was a very important subject. Now in 1970, I was about 10 years old, there were 1,128 traffic deaths in the state of Wisconsin, at 4.34 deaths per 100 million miles traveled. By 2014, there were 498 traffic deaths in Wisconsin, and a substantial reduction in and of itself, but the rate had fallen, and that's the most significant thing. If we still had the same rate of highway deaths in Wisconsin in 2014 that we had in 1970, there would have been almost 3,000 traffic deaths in the state of Wisconsin. And the reason I thought this was important is because as a prosecutor for many years, I looked at part of my job, an important part of my job was highway safety and trying to save lives. And we've saved thousands of lives by using evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based practices, a multidisciplinary approach. We had a compelling public interest, and there's been a lot of public and private collaboration in many different ways, which I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. But we've had safer highways, safer automobiles, trucks, safety statutes, and the enforcement of those, and public awareness. So what is EBDM? It's the practice of using research findings to inform decisions or to guide decisions. And as applied to the criminal justice system, there are 4 pillars of evidence-based decision-making. The first, and I think this is again, some of this gets a little bit confusing, and I'm hoping that with some repetition that over time we'll all internalize these things. But the bottom line of the first pillar is that the professional judgment of criminal justice decision makers is enhanced by, when informed by evidence-based knowledge. That's both research as well as information and so forth. And that includes anybody who's making a decision. That's part of our map that we've created for the criminal justice process, is to show you where those decision points are. And it's from law enforcement, when they first make contact with someone out in the public, all the way through the system, charging decisions, contact at the jail and things that occur within the jail system, prosecutorial decisions, plea agreement decisions, bail decisions by courts, sentencing decisions by courts, and then probation and decisions that are made during probation or other corrections events, and so forth. The second pillar is that every interaction within the criminal justice system offers an opportunity to contribute to harm reduction. Now you notice I have the picture of the grumpy judge, and I figured it's probably a good idea to pick on judges in this thing. But the research shows that how people are treated by judges, how they're treated in the courts, can make a substantial difference in recidivism, rates of recidivism. And so when you look at judges, we talk about proportionality, we talk about fairness, making sure people have an opportunity to be heard, being treated with respect, and so forth. All of those things are important in terms of how courts treat people and how people are going to see their courts. Now, part of the point here is that this applies to everyone across the system. Whether you are in a clerical position, or whether you're a law enforcement person, whether you're a probation officer, if you're a jailer, wherever you are in the system, how you treat people can make a significant difference in how the system will be perceived and the effectiveness of your overall system. Just something I want to throw in here is that if you find yourself or a case you're involved in, if it gets the bright, hot glare of the national media, and we've had that a few times here, you want to make sure that you're competent and that you're doing something that you can be proud of, that you're doing quality work. Again, think of it in terms of you're contributing to building a cathedral. So, the third, systems like our criminal justice system, they get better outcomes when they work collaboratively. Now, I chose in here the Continental Congress. They came up, obviously, with the Constitution of the United States of America. You have people from all across the early country had very competing interests and different ideas about how things ought to be done. But these gentlemen collaborated, and anyone who reads about our Constitutional Convention, the development of this country, will certainly have to agree that a lot of research was done, a lot of work was done, and they came up with a pretty good product, even though we don't always agree with who's running for office at any given time or who's in office or what decisions are made. But I don't think anyone in this room would want to argue that we don't have the greatest country on the planet. The criminal justice system will continually learn and improve when professionals make decisions based on the collection, analysis, and use of data and information. Now, this is really, I see, one of the more difficult parts. We have some ideas, and my pet ideas, I just want to whet your appetite a little bit, is that I believe that we can make a significant difference in reducing bail jumping offenses and repeat OWIs, particularly OWIs where people are already on bond for a criminal OWI. There are many things that we can do in the pretrial phase. Part of that, we've worked collaboratively with the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office here for some time in using a sober link, for example, which can detect whether someone's drinking and it will send a text. But these are things that if we're able to, with various bond decisions, come up a way to measure where we're at, what we have, what do we want to change, what are the benchmarks we're looking for, and then we use the data that we collect and analyze to see whether we're making progress, whether we're accomplishing what it is we're trying to accomplish. And this works for a number of different areas. Okay. And some things are more difficult, but we're not going to get into the finer details because many of these things we're going to talk about today, there may be later trainings where they go into a great deal of depth. I know that I've been to a couple of two-day trainings. Actually, our drug court training in California was, I think, how many days was that? 4 very intense days. But the idea is that we continue to learn, we continue to try and come up with ways to measure what we're doing, and that we try and inform our decisions on an ongoing basis. So those are the 4 pillars, if you will. Now, why criminal justice? Okay, we have an interesting history of criminal justice in America. In 1990, I was a new prosecutor, 30 years old, and or just about 30, I suppose. We had about 7,500 inmates in our Wisconsin prison system. By 2014, after 24 years, we had almost 23,000. And that wasn't even the high water mark. The high water mark was close to 24,000. The population increase for Wisconsin over that period of time was 17%, but our prison population increase was 202%. And our DOC budget's now well over $1 billion. I think the last number I heard was $1.4 billion. And we've reached a point where I don't think anyone would argue that we don't need another judge in Dunn County. I don't think anyone would argue that we don't need another DA or district assistant DA in Dunn County. But the answer that we get for those things, as many departments will get, is that we can't afford it. The state can't afford to give us another judge. They can't afford to give us another prosecutor or a prosecutor and a half, which is probably really what we need. And so the state has really reached a point where we can't continue doing business the way we've been doing business all these years. We have to come up with a way to get more bang for our buck. Okay, so if you compare Wisconsin and Minnesota, the general populations are very close. We rank 20th and 21st, respectively. The incarceration rate in Wisconsin, however, is 370 per 100,000 people, almost twice what the incarceration rate is in the state of Minnesota. We rank 27th, they rank 49th in incarceration, And the per capita cost, we spend approximately twice what Minnesota spends. So wouldn't it be great if we could identify who is likely to reoffend, figure out why offenders offend again and again, and then a change offender behavior? Wouldn't it be nice if we could reduce recidivism by 30%? Well, as it turns out we can. Okay, so I have an example here, again with some attribution appropriate here for Judge Schumacher in Eau Claire, but of the following scenarios, who's more likely to reoffend? You have an OWI first, person's in a bar drinking with friends, they cross the center line, .12, they're employed, they have a driver's license, their attitude is the cop is just doing their job. Also, it's not okay to drink and drive, and they have a family to support sobriety. Second situation, OWI first, someone's in a bar with friends, crossed the center line, .12, no job, no driver's license. Their attitude is the cop is out to get me. Everybody does it, and they come where their support system is basically a dysfunctional family. So who's more likely to reoffend? Sort of a rhetorical question. So you'll get back to some of these details later on. But if you have experience in this, you should be able to point out the various criminogenic needs that the individual has in the second scenario. So we also have, and you're going to see this also in, at least in Sarah's presentation, the 7 research principles for effective intervention. And each one of these, you could expect to spend a great deal of time in training to really truly get a good feel for it and how it works. But the first is assess actuarial risks and needs. Now, again, you're going to hear about that from Commander Swartz about the law enforcement proxy that's been developed with the work of the EBDM and a subcommittee and a deferred prosecution work group. And if I remember, well, I'm not going to go off on that tangent just yet. In any event, but that is identifying what those needs are, again, is what their risks are. The second is to focus our resources on the medium and high risk individuals. The third is to target those criminogenic needs. The fourth, swift, certain, and proportional responses. Fifth, increase the use of positive reinforcements. The research tells us that 4-to-1 is sort of an optimal ratio, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but the point is that to use a little bit more positive reinforcement and positives in a system that has traditionally been about negative, it's been about punishment, and here's, I guess, a point where I want to throw this in. There are many different types of violations that are dealt with in the criminal justice system. And you may have somebody who comes up low risk on the proxy. They may be going away to prison for a long time. Sometimes the seriousness of the offense drives the decision. But much of what we do with the people we see over and over again is what we're trying to do is change their behavior. We're talking about addictions. We're talking about behavior that's related to addictions. 6 and 7. I don't have this down very well. Engage ongoing support in natural communities. I'm not going to go into that too much. But number 7 is very important, and you'll hear this from Charisse, I believe, as well as from Sarah. But pairing sanctions with intervention. So the penalties or the punishment by itself is not nearly as effective as when they're paired with some sort of an intervention, some sort of treatment response. So these are some examples of change targets that we have. And there are others. Reduce bail and bond violations, reduce the number of victimizations, reduce repeat OWI cases, reduce case processing times, reduce caseloads, and improve outcomes. I chose the train wreck because a lot of the people that we deal with, their life is like a train wreck. All right, so the core values we want to uphold in doing this is that, number 1, public safety. You know, I think one of the bad raps that some of this information gets without people getting the training, and thus the reason we feel that we need to get this training and this discussion going on an ongoing basis throughout the criminal justice system, is to assure people that public safety is still number 1. But also, our system, we expect fairness. The public expects fairness. Also, individual liberty, respect for victims of crime, respect for the rule of law, and respect for the discretion that different players have For example, police officers have discretion, and so when we talk about the pretrial diversion program, for example, the law enforcement officers still have the discretion on whether to make an arrest or not. Discretion within the DA's office for prosecutorial decisions, and courts and their discretion. And again, an appreciation for the different perspectives. All right, now I'm going to call on Sarah Benedict. Sarah's been the criminal justice coordinator in Dunn County for, I guess it's almost 2 years.
Yeah, a little over 2.
If I remember right, I was running for judge, and we had the interviews for that position. And I had, again, an opportunity to go to training with Sarah in California. It's where they, well, I'm not going to go into that joke, but without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sarah Benedict. Sarah?
Well, great turnout today, so thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Just going to advance slides a little bit. So my focus, my portion is focused really on the evidence-based practices. So this is the research really behind some of the ideas that we have. And the goal is really to increase public safety by reducing recidivism. So let's jump into it. So evidence-based practice really is the marriage of research with practice. So we know that there's been a lot of research in the last 20, 30 years in the field that we have a lot to learn from. Like so many systems out there, they're constantly improving. They're learning and readjusting and improving as they go along. So that's what we want to do in the criminal justice system. So it's really about measuring, it's about using research, it's about really trying to be focused on that reducing recidivism and increasing public safety. And like Judge Peterson indicated, we can see a 30% reduction in recidivism if we apply these research-based principles. So how does evidence-based practices differ from evidence-based decision-making? The evidence-based decision-making, the EBDM that Jim was talking about, really is more of a systems focus. It's really applying that evidence-based practice to a system overall. But when we're talking about